The world would never be the same after this boy grew up. Are you ready to discover the extraordinary journey of a businessman who became the most powerful person in America? Grab your headphones and prepare for an incredible story that will improve your English while taking you through the dramatic life of Donald Trump. Donald Trump was born on the 14th of June, 1946, in Queens, New York City. He was the fourth of 5 children in a wealthy family. His father, Fred Trump, was a successful real estate developer who built homes and apartments throughout New York. Can you imagine growing up with a father who taught you about business from the moment you could talk? Young Donald lived in a large 23-room house in the wealthy neighborhood of Jamaica Estates. His childhood was comfortable, but his father was strict and demanding. Success comes from hard work, Fred would tell his children. Nothing in life is given to you. Donald's mother, Mary, was an immigrant from Scotland who came to America seeking a better life. She taught Donald good manners and the importance of presentation. As a child, Donald was energetic and assertive. His parents noticed he had endless energy and a strong personality that sometimes got him into trouble at school. Picture this: a tall blonde boy who couldn't sit still and always wanted to be the leader in games with other children. When Donald was 13 years old, his parents decided his behavior needed more discipline. They sent him to the New York Military Academy, a strict boarding school where students wore uniforms and followed rigid rules. The military school changed young Donald. He thrived in the competitive environment and became a star athlete and student leader. He loved winning awards and recognition. "I want to be the best at everything I do," he told his classmates. The seeds of ambition were already growing inside him. During his time at the academy, Donald learned to channel his energy into achievement. He played baseball, football, and soccer. The coaches admired his competitive spirit. But even as a teenager, Donald was already thinking about following in his father's footsteps. Real estate fascinated him. While other boys his age dreamed of becoming astronauts or baseball players, Donald dreamed of building skyscrapers taller than anyone had ever seen. No one knew that this ambitious young man would someday put his name on buildings around the world and ultimately reach for the highest office in America. What happened after Donald finished military school? How did he turn his father's successful but modest real estate business into a global empire? Hold on tight as we continue our story. After graduating from the New York Military Academy in 1964, Donald Trump was ready for the next step in his journey. But what would shape the thinking of the future business mogul? Donald first attended Fordham University in New York for 2 years. But he wanted something more prestigious, something that would give him connections to the most powerful people. In 1966, he transferred to the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the most respected business schools in America. Can you imagine the determination it took to get accepted there? At Wharton, Donald studied real estate and economics. While other students spent their weekends partying, Donald often traveled back to New York to work with his father, learning the family business from the ground up. "I don't have time to relax," he told a classmate who invited him to a party. "I'm building my future." Donald graduated from Wharton in 1968 with a bachelor's degree in economics. He was now educated and ready to join his father's company, Elizabeth Trump Son. Working alongside his father, Donald learned valuable lessons about real estate development. Fred Trump's business focused on building middle-class rental housing in Brooklyn and Queens. But young Donald had bigger dreams. He looked across the East River at the shining skyscrapers of Manhattan. That was where he wanted to make his mark. "Manhattan is where the real money is," he told his father. "That's where we need to go next." Fred was cautious about Manhattan's expensive and competitive market. But Donald was persistent and convinced his father to let him explore opportunities there. In 1971, Donald moved to an apartment in Manhattan and began networking with powerful people in the city. He joined exclusive clubs and made connections with politicians, bankers, and other business leaders. Donald knew that success in real estate wasn't just about buildings, it was about relationships. He cultivated a personal image as someone who belonged in the world of wealth and luxury. By the early 1970s, America was facing economic challenges. Many people were leaving New York City, and the city government was almost bankrupt. Properties were cheap, but most developers were afraid to invest. Donald saw opportunity where others saw risk. While still working for his father's company, he began looking for his first major Manhattan deal. In 1973, Donald and his father faced a serious challenge when the U.S. Justice Department sued their company for discriminating against African American rental applicants. The Trumps denied the accusations and fought the case. Eventually, they settled the lawsuit without admitting guilt, but agreed to change their rental policies. This early controversy taught Donald an important lesson about dealing with public criticism. Never back down. As the 1970s continued, New York City's finances grew worse. The city was dangerous, dirty, and losing population. But Donald Trump saw something others missed the chance to buy valuable properties at bargain prices. What would be Donald's first big Manhattan deal? How would he transform from Fred Trump's son into a famous businessman in his own right? The answer would change everything for the ambitious young man from Queens. In 1975, Donald Trump spotted an opportunity that would change his life forever. The Commodore Hotel near Grand Central Station was old and losing money. The neighborhood around it was dangerous and dirty. Would you have seen potential in a failing hotel in a troubled area? Most people wouldn't, but Donald did. He negotiated to buy the hotel for just $10 million when no one else wanted it. But there was a problem. He needed much more money to renovate it. Donald used his growing connections to secure something no other young developer had gotten before, a tax break from the city worth millions of dollars. He also convinced the Hyatt hotel chain to partner with him. "This hotel will be the most beautiful in New York," he promised the city officials. It will help bring this area back to life. Construction began in 1978. Donald completely transformed the old hotel, covering the outside with shiny glass that reflected the sky. The inside became luxurious and modern. When the Grand Hyatt Hotel opened in 1980, it was an instant success. People were amazed at the transformation. Donald Trump, only 34 years old, had proven he could succeed in Manhattan's competitive real estate market. But Donald wasn't satisfied with just one success. He was already planning something much bigger. In 1979, Donald set his sights on a prime piece of land on Fifth Avenue. He wanted to build the most luxurious building in New York City, Trump Tower. The location was perfect, but there was a problem. A respected store and an art museum occupied the site. Donald negotiated for months to buy the property. Once he owned the land, Donald faced another challenge. He promised to save beautiful Art Deco sculptures from the old building, but they were destroyed during demolition. This caused his first major public relations problem. Despite the controversy, construction of Trump Tower continued. Donald insisted on the finest materials, beautiful bronze glass, and pink marble imported from Italy. Trump Tower opened in 1983 and immediately became one of New York's most famous buildings. The 58-story skyscraper featured luxury apartments, high-end stores, and a stunning 6-story atrium with waterfalls. Can you imagine how proud Donald felt seeing his name in huge letters on one of Manhattan's most prestigious buildings? Trump Tower became more than just a building, it became a symbol of Donald's success and his brand. Celebrities, wealthy business people, and even royalty wanted to live or shop there. Donald and his first wife, Ivana, whom he had married in 1977, moved into the penthouse at the top of Trump Tower. Their home featured gold-plated fixtures, crystal chandeliers, and panoramic views of Central Park. By the mid-1980s, Donald Trump was no longer just a real estate developer. He was becoming a celebrity. People recognized him on the street. Magazines wanted to feature him on their covers. What would Donald do with his growing fame and success? Would he be satisfied with his achievements, or would his ambition drive him to take even bigger risks? The next chapter in Donald Trump's story would bring both triumphs and troubles. By the mid-1980s, Donald Trump's confidence was at an all-time high. His success with Trump Tower made him believe he could succeed at anything. "Business is my art," he often said. Others paint beautifully on canvas or write wonderful poetry. I like making deals, preferably big deals. In 1984, Donald decided to enter the casino business in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Atlantic City was trying to become the gambling capital of the East Coast, like Las Vegas in the West. Donald opened the Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino, quickly followed by Trump's Castle. His casinos featured extravagant designs with chandeliers, marble floors, and, of course, his name in huge letters. Are you starting to see a pattern in Donald's business strategy. He believed his name itself was valuable and represented luxury and success. In 1987, Donald published his first book, The Art of the Deal. The book became a bestseller and introduced millions of people to Donald's business philosophy. "I don't do it for the money," he wrote. "I've got enough, much more than I'll ever need. I do it to do it. Deals are my art form." The book made Donald a household name across America. People who had never been to New York knew who Donald Trump was and what he represented: wealth, success, and luxury. By 1988, Donald made his most expensive purchase, yet the Plaza Hotel in New York, for $407 million. The historic hotel was a landmark, and Donald promised to make it even more magnificent. "I haven't purchased a building," he told reporters. "I have purchased a masterpiece." Donald's business empire now included luxury buildings, hotels, casinos, and even an airline called Trump Shuttle. His personal wealth grew into the billions of dollars. He appeared on television talk shows, gave interviews to magazines, and became known for his confidence and, would say, boastful personality. "I like thinking big," he often said. "If you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big." Donald's personal life also made headlines. His marriage to Ivana, who helped manage some of his properties, was a fixture in New York society. They had 3 children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. By the late 1980s, Donald Trump was at the height of his success. His name appeared on buildings, products, and in newspaper headlines almost daily. But dark clouds were forming on the horizon. Donald had borrowed enormous amounts of money to fund his expanding empire. If anything went wrong with the economy, he would face serious trouble. What would happen when the economic boom of the 1980s ended? Could Donald's empire survive a downturn? The answers would test everything the ambitious businessman had built. The early 1990s brought the first major crisis in Donald Trump's business career. The American economy entered a recession, and Donald's highly leveraged empire began to crumble. His casinos in Atlantic City were losing money. The Trump Shuttle airline wasn't profitable. The Plaza Hotel was worth much less than he had paid for it. Most seriously, Donald had personally guaranteed over $900 million in loans. Can you imagine owing almost $1 billion that you personally had to repay? By 1991, Donald's businesses were in serious trouble. He couldn't make payments on his loans. Several of his companies filed for bankruptcy protection to reorganize their debts. Donald's personal life was also falling apart. His marriage to Ivana ended in a very public divorce in 1992, after his affair with Marla Maples became tabloid news. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can climb back up, Donald later reflected on this difficult period. The man who had symbolized success now appeared to be a failure. Many people believed Donald Trump's business career was over, but Donald refused to give up. He negotiated with banks to restructure his debts. He sold some properties and gave up control of others while keeping his name on them. Donald used his skills as a negotiator to convince creditors that his name and involvement were valuable enough to keep him in charge of many properties, even those he no longer fully owned. "The worst thing you can do in a deal is seem desperate to make it," he wrote. "That makes the other guy smell blood, and then you're dead." By the mid-1990s, Donald's financial situation slowly improved. The economy recovered, and he began to rebuild his brand and his business. In 1996, Donald purchased the rights to the Miss Universe, Miss USA, and Miss Teen USA beauty pageants. These high-profile events gave him valuable television exposure. Donald married Marla Maples in 1993, and they had a daughter named Tiffany. However, this marriage also ended in divorce in 1999. As the 1990s continued, Donald focused on rebuilding his reputation. He positioned himself as the comeback king of businessmen who had faced disaster and survived. In 1999, Donald met Melania Knaus, a model from Slovenia. They would later marry in 2005 and have a son named Baron. By the end of the 1990s, Donald had weathered the storm. His businesses were more stable, though not as grand as before. But he was about to reinvent himself in a way that would make him more famous than ever. What would Donald Trump do to return to the spotlight? How would he transform his image for a new century? The answer would come through the power of television. In the early 2000s, Donald Trump found a new way to build his brand through the growing medium of reality television. NBC approached Donald with an idea for a show that would feature him as a tough but fair boss, evaluating business-minded contestants. The show would be called The Apprentice. "It'll never work," some television executives said. Business isn't entertaining enough for prime time. But Donald believed in the concept. He understood something important. Americans were fascinated by wealth and success. They would watch a show that gave them a glimpse into that world. The Apprentice premiered in January 2004 and was an immediate hit. Over 20 million people watched the first season. Donald became famous for his catchphrase on the show, "You're fired." Those two words, delivered dramatically at the end of each episode, became part of American culture. Can you imagine how this show changed public perception of Donald Trump? Before The Apprentice, many people saw him as a failed businessman who had once been successful. Now he was America's most famous boss. For the next decade, Donald appeared on television weekly, sitting in a boardroom with his children Donald Jr. and Ivanka as they evaluated contestants' business skills. The show portrayed Donald as a brilliant businessman who had created a vast empire through his own talent and hard work. Viewers rarely heard about his past financial troubles. The Apprentice made Donald Trump a household name in parts of America where he had never been known before. People in small towns and rural areas who had never been to New York now felt they knew Donald Trump. The success of The Apprentice allowed Donald to expand his business in new directions. He started Trump University, offering seminars on real estate investing. He licensed his name to products ranging from steaks to vodka to ties. During this period, Donald's real estate business also recovered. He developed Trump International Hotel and Tower in Chicago and built luxury properties in many other cities. Donald also became active on the new social media platform Twitter, where he shared his thoughts on business, politics, and current events. His direct communication style attracted millions of followers. In 2011, Donald began speaking more openly about politics. He questioned whether President Barack Obama was born in the United States, becoming a leader of the birther movement. This controversial position gained Donald attention from conservative media and voters. Some people criticized him, but others agreed with his statements. By 2015, Donald Trump had transformed himself again. From real estate developer to casino owner to television star, he had reinvented himself multiple times. But his most dramatic transformation was yet to come. What would Donald Trump do next? How would a businessman and television celebrity approach the world of politics? The next chapter would shock the world. In June 2015, Donald Trump rode down the golden escalator in Trump Tower to make a surprising announcement. With his wife Melania by his side, he declared he was running for President of the United States. Most political experts laughed. How could a businessman with no political experience think he could become president? When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best, Donald said in his announcement speech. His strong statements about immigration immediately caused controversy. Many people expected Donald's campaign to last only a few weeks. But something unexpected happened. His straightforward, often controversial style resonated with many Americans. Donald's campaign rallies drew enormous crowds. He spoke without a teleprompter, using simple language that connected with voters who felt ignored by traditional politicians. "I will build a great wall on our southern border, and Mexico will pay for it," became one of his famous campaign promises. His supporters would chant, "Build the wall," at his rallies. Can you imagine the shock of professional politicians when they saw Donald Trump's popularity growing? They had spent their lives in politics while he was a newcomer. During the Republican primary debates, Donald stood out among the 16 other candidates. He gave his opponents nicknames like Low Energy Jeb and Little Marco. By May 2016, Donald Trump had defeated all his Republican rivals and secured the party's nomination for president. Now he faced Democrat Hillary Clinton in the general election. The 2016 presidential campaign was one of the most divisive in American history. Donald's unconventional style broke all the rules of traditional politics. He used Twitter to communicate directly with voters, often posting messages late at night or early in the morning. He held huge rallies where he spoke for over an hour without a script. "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters," Donald said, expressing confidence in his supporters' loyalty. The campaign faced several crises, including the release of a recording where Donald made inappropriate comments about women. Many political experts thought his campaign was finished, but Donald survived each controversy and continued to draw support from voters who wanted change in Washington. As Election Day approached in November 2016, polls showed Hillary Clinton with a lead. Most experts predicted she would win easily. Election night brought a stunning surprise. Donald Trump won key states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin that Republicans hadn't won in decades. At 2:30 a.m. on November 9, 2016, Donald Trump was declared the winner of the presidential election. He would become the 45th President of the United States. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer, Donald promised in his victory speech. How would this businessman and television star govern the most powerful nation on earth? The world was about to find out. On January 20, 2017, Donald Trump placed his hand on 2 Bibles and took the oath of office as President of the United States. At 70 years old, he became the oldest person ever to begin a first term as president. From this day forward, it's going to be America first, he declared in his inaugural address. The businessman was now the leader of the world's most powerful country. Donald's transition from business to government was not smooth. He brought his business style to the White House, making quick decisions, changing course suddenly, and communicating directly through Twitter. Within his first week in office, Donald signed an executive order restricting travel from several Muslim-majority countries. This travel ban immediately faced legal challenges and protests. Can you imagine the pressure of being president when you've never held any political office before? Donald was learning on the job, and the whole world was watching. Donald promised to drain the swamp in Washington, meaning he would remove corrupt influences. He appointed business executives to government positions and focused on cutting regulations. In December 2017, Donald signed a major tax cut bill that reduced taxes for corporations and many individuals. Supporters called it an economic boost, while critics said it favored the wealthy. "We are making America great again," Donald often said, referring to his campaign slogan. Donald's presidency was marked by high staff turnover. Many officials joined his administration only to leave or be fired months later. This created a sense of constant change in the White House. On foreign policy, Donald took a tougher stance toward China, renegotiated trade agreements, and met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, first sitting US president to do so. Donald's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move the US embassy there fulfilled a campaign promise, but generated controversy around the world. In domestic policy, Donald focused on immigration enforcement. His administration separated migrant families at the border, generating intense criticism before changing the policy. Donald appointed 3 conservative justices to the Supreme Court: Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. These appointments shifted the court in a more conservative direction for years to come. In December 2019, the House of Representatives impeached Donald on charges of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress related to his dealings with Ukraine. The Senate, controlled by Republicans, acquitted him in February 2020. "It was a perfect phone call," Donald insisted about his conversation with Ukraine's president that had led to the impeachment. Then, in early 2020, a new challenge emerged: the pandemic. Donald initially downplayed the threat before declaring a national emergency in March. His administration restricted travel from China and later Europe. It launched Operation Warp Speed to develop vaccines quickly, but faced criticism for not creating a coordinated national response to the virus. As the pandemic worsened, the US economy suffered its worst contraction since the Great Depression. Unemployment soared and businesses closed. By the fall of 2020, over 200 Americans had died. The pandemic would define the final year of Donald's presidency and shape his campaign for re-election. Would Americans give Donald Trump a second term? Or would they choose a new leader during one of the most challenging periods in modern American history? The year 2020 brought unprecedented challenges for President Donald Trump. The pandemic had changed American life, the economy was struggling, and racial tensions were high following the death of George Floyd. In the midst of these crises, Donald faced a re-election campaign against former Vice President Joe Biden. "We built the greatest economy in the history of the world, and we'll do it again," Donald promised voters, focusing on the strong pre-pandemic economy. The campaign looked very different from 2016. Due to the pandemic restrictions, Donald couldn't hold as many of the large rallies he loved. Joe Biden conducted a more limited campaign, often speaking from his home. In October 2020, Donald himself contracted the pandemic and was hospitalized at Walter Reed Medical Center. He recovered quickly and returned to campaigning, telling Americans not to fear the virus. "Don't let it dominate your life," he said after his recovery, though many criticized this message as insensitive to those who had lost loved ones. Can you imagine how difficult it was to campaign during a global pandemic? Both candidates had to find new ways to reach voters when traditional campaigning was dangerous. As Election Day approached, polls showed Joe Biden with a significant lead. Donald insisted the race was closer than the polls suggested, just as he had in 2016. Election Day came on November 3, 2020, but because of the large number of mail-in ballots due to the pandemic, the results weren't immediately clear. As votes were counted in the days following the election, Joe Biden took leads in key states. Donald claimed there were voting irregularities and began legal challenges. "We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election," Donald declared on election night, before all votes had been counted. On November 7, major news organizations projected Joe Biden as the winner of the presidential election. Donald refused to concede, continuing to claim the election had been stolen. In the following weeks, Donald's legal team filed dozens of lawsuits challenging the results in various states. Nearly all were dismissed by the courts for lack of evidence. On January 6, 2021, as Congress met to certify the Electoral College results, Donald addressed a large crowd of his supporters in Washington, D.C. "We will never give up. We will never concede," he told the crowd. Later that day, some of his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol building, resulting in several deaths and many injuries. The Capitol riot shocked the nation and the world. 1 week later, the House of Representatives impeached Donald for incitement of insurrection, making him the first president to be impeached twice. On January 20, 2021, Donald Trump left the White House for the last time as president. Breaking tradition, he did not attend Joe Biden's inauguration. After leaving office, Donald remained politically active. He settled at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida and continued to claim the 2020 election had been stolen. Despite his election loss, Donald maintained strong support among Republicans. Many political observers believed he would run for president again in 2024. In November 2022, surrounded by family and supporters at Mar-a-Lago, Donald made his announcement. In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States. Would Donald Trump make a historic comeback? Could he win back the White House in 2024? The final chapter of our story reveals what happened next. In the years following his presidency, Donald Trump faced unprecedented challenges. Legal investigations, 2 impeachments, and political opposition would have ended most political careers. But Donald Trump was never like most politicians. Throughout 2023, Donald faced multiple indictments in New York, Florida, Georgia, and Washington, D.C. These cases involved allegations ranging from business fraud to his actions after the 2020 election. They're not coming after me, they're coming after you. I'm just standing in the way, Donald told his supporters about the legal cases against him. Despite these challenges, Donald's support among Republicans remained strong. He led polls for the Republican nomination throughout 2023. In early 2024, the Republican presidential primaries began. Donald faced several challenges, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Can you imagine the determination it takes to run for president at 77 years old while facing multiple legal trials? Donald's energy seemed undiminished as he campaigned across the country. By March 2024, Donald had secured enough delegates to become the Republican nominee for president. He would face President Joe Biden in a rematch of their 2020 contest. The 2024 campaign focused on inflation, immigration, and America's role in the world. Donald promised to secure the border, reduce inflation, and end international conflicts. Then, in July 2024, President Biden made the surprising announcement that he would not seek re-election. Vice President Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee instead. The race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris was extremely close. Polls showed them tied in many battleground states as Election Day approached. On November 5, 2024, Americans went to the polls. The counting of votes continued into the night and the following days. Finally, the results became clear. Donald Trump had won the 2024 presidential election. At 78 years old, he became the second president in American history to serve non-consecutive terms, after Grover Cleveland in the 1890s. This is a victory not just for me, but for every American who believes in second chances, Donald declared in his victory speech. On January 20, 2025, Donald Trump took the oath of office as the 47th President of the United States. Looking back at Donald Trump's extraordinary life, what can we learn? His story teaches us about persistence. He faced bankruptcy, political defeat, and legal troubles, yet always found a way to come back. It shows us the power of self-belief. Donald always believed he would succeed, even when others doubted him. It reminds us that history is unpredictable. Few would have imagined that a real estate developer and television star would become president once, let alone twice. Donald Trump's life also reflects the divisions in American society. Some see him as a successful businessman who speaks truth to power. Others view him as a divisive figure who challenges democratic norms. Whatever your opinion of Donald Trump, his journey from a wealthy child in Queens to the White House represents one of the most remarkable life stories in American history. Thank you for listening to this story of ambition, success, failure, and comeback. We hope it has helped improve your English while teaching you about this fascinating historical figure. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to Learn English Through Stories for more fascinating tales that will help you learn English while exploring history. What historical figure would you like to learn about next? Let us know in the comments below.